สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ This week I want to talk about this book, a very powerful and empowering book, Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor E. Frankl. Now, Viktor E. Frankl, he was a psychiatrist, and he was a prisoner in the concentration camps during the Nazi regime. And he was in the camps for 3 years before he was liberated when the Nazis lost. And it is his account of his experiences in the concentration camp and what was it that enabled him to garner and bring out the inner strength needed in order to survive such an ordeal and unimaginable circumstances and torture on pretty much all levels, on the physical level and on the emotional, mental, psychological level. Now, there are 3 main quotes from this book that I really loved that I want to share. And I think it speaks about the message, the core message, and it is simply this. Number 1, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And the other one is, everything can be taken from man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And this one, Viktor E. Frankl was quite a fan of Friedrich Nietzsche's work, and he would quote him often. So this one is quoted from Nietzsche, a very famous philosopher. Those who have a why to live can bear with almost anyhow. So what do these quotes have in common? You see, I think at the end of the day, it is about understanding the fact of life that you can't control outside circumstances. You can't control what other people do. You can't really control their behaviors, their actions. You can't really control the politics. You can't really control war. You can't really control the weather. You can't really control the economy, at least not on an individual level. You can't really control what happens in life, what happens and the life situations that unfold around you and perhaps to you. But what you can always control, however, is how you choose to respond to any given situation or circumstances. And how you choose to respond includes the attitudes that you choose to adopt, no matter how bleak, how dark, how hopeless the situation may seem. And reading through this book, it is such a humbling thing to read, I think, in my opinion, because in the current day and age, we have so many things that we take for granted, including myself. All the comfort that we have in each and every day, I take for granted from time to time, and I have to constantly remind myself of to be grateful for the fortunes that I have, whether it's physical comfort, having a house, a comfortable house, living in security, living in a safe place where I don't have to worry about my security and the security of my family, and countless things. Being grateful for all the relationships and friendships that I have or that we have. These things, when they get taken away from us, such as in Victor's experience in a concentration camp, then the question is, what do we have left? What do we have left? And what we have left is a choice. It can be a very difficult choice nonetheless, but it is always a choice. And that choice involves choosing to bear your suffering in a very brave and courageous manner, And I think that's really beautiful. Now, I'm not quoting him exactly in the book, but that's the message I got from reading it. Here is the story of a man who was in the concentration camps where life is so uncertain. Death is all around him. Pain and suffering, famine, all the bad things we could possibly imagine in the worst of the worst. It's all around him. But yet he still summoned the will to live, to carry on each and every day. He was forced to do strong, hard labor work as a prisoner. And because he was a psychiatrist and also a doctor, he was also given work to care for other camp inmates. And you see such horrible stories that happened by the Nazis, and even between the prisoners themselves, right? Such as some prisoners who would betray one another in order to save their own skin or save their own lives. But I won't go into detail. I'll leave it to you to find out when you read the book. But the point is, it was so humbling to read one passage I remember when he was talking about how even in the darkest of times, not knowing if you're going to survive until tomorrow or not, he could still find joy and pleasure in the smallest of things. And there was one moment when this was perfectly illustrated, where in such a dark time, illness, death, being a prisoner in the concentration camps. And Victor explained a story where an inmate saw a beautiful sunset and called him outside to go look at the beautiful sunset. And they joyously went out and enjoyed the beautiful sunset, in contrast to the fence of the barbed wire fence of the camp premises. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Here you are, a prisoner in the concentration camps, barely having enough energy to survive each and every day because you're starved, right? You don't have enough food. You're forced to work in really, really, really harsh conditions. And you're, if you don't behave in a line or in the way they want, if you don't do the work in the way that they approve of, then maybe you'll get beaten. Maybe you'll get abused. Maybe you'll get sent to the gas chambers and murdered. Maybe you'll get mentally or psychologically or emotionally tortured, right? And here you are, still able to enjoy a sunset. And this is a man who had everything taken away from him. At that time, he did not know yet, but the Nazis, after liberation, he would later find out that the Nazis had killed pretty much his entire family, his parents and his wife, who he had loved very dearly. But yet, despite all of this, he was still able to find meaning in his suffering and still able to enjoy even a simple sunset, which we all take for granted, or which we often take for granted. A small piece of bread, a small cigarette was something really meaningful. It could be something really, really meaningful. And another story that really I thought was really inspiring and touching was when he was a doctor in the camps, and he saw a patient which he knew was going to die very soon, because this patient was in very ill health and had lost the will to live, lost his meaning to live. And Victor realized that this patient was going to die soon. Yet, despite being starved himself, despite being in ill health himself, and despite being on the verge of death himself, and despite being not having enough food to eat himself, he himself, Victor, gave a last piece of bread to this dying patient. And you think, wow, wouldn't you think that Victor could have made better use of the piece of bread, right? Because the patient's clearly going to die very soon. But it was that small act of sacrifice that was done in order to give some sense of comfort to your fellow human being. despite being in the harshest of conditions and knowing that this fellow human was going to die in the next hours or days, and indeed that patient did die. And you can imagine the courage, the compassion, the humanity that was in Victor's heart. And here lies the point of the book. Meaning. If you have a meaning, even in the darkest of your days, or even in the worst of your sufferings, if you can find something meaningful in that is grounded internally, meaning grounded in your choice, in your choosing, in something that you find meaningful and fulfilling and rewarding, to be able to go through that suffering in a courageous way with your head held high. Then, if you have that, a man who has this can bear almost anything life has to throw at him. And I want to share that in today's video. So, as food for thought, allow us to learn from the lessons that Victor is trying to teach us. In all these challenges and difficulties and uncertainties and loss and misfortunes and sadness and suffering that we each have to go through sooner or later, in each and in our own ways, because life has different examinations for each and every one of us, if I may put it that way. Try to find a way to bear that suffering with your head held high, with your dignity intact, with your humanity in your heart. And that will be the key to get you through any difficulty in life. And once you get through it, you will have such a deep fulfillment in your heart, because you know nothing has the power to take away the last of your inner freedom. Nothing, no one, no situation, no act, no circumstance has the power to take away your inner spirit. Nothing has the power to break your heart and your inner spirit. And your choice to choose your attitude courageously and with your head held high and bravely, and with dignity. Nothing has the power to take that away from you. That domain always lies within your control. And if you learn how to play that card that is dealt to you, this I'm quoting, paraphrasing something I remember from a philosophical quote, I think from some Greek philosophy, that they said, play your card as if fate, something along the lines of, play your card as if fate dealt it to you and play it as your own, something like that. So the point is, when you know that you can choose how you want to go through your suffering, and you know that you can choose to go through it with your dignity, with your humanity, with humility, with courage, with your head held high, then you know that nothing has the power to break your spirit and break your soul. And that is empowering. That is true power, I would say. And that anybody who can achieve this way of thinking, who can adopt this attitude and perspective, is one who I would consider has mastered the art of life. I hope this short video and review was valuable for you. I encourage you to read this really, really beautiful and wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl. Okay? And we can learn the lessons that this brave man had learned from going through 3 years in a concentration camp. And I'll see you next time. สวัสดีครับ